Energy Transition, Episode 5. Consequence for Energy in Europe, with Irina Slav, energy journalist. David Blackman, contributor to Forbes and the editor for Shale magazine. And Armando Cavanha, Catholic University in Cavanha Con. Good morning, good afternoon. Have a good day for both.
Hello, happy Monday to you both.
Oh, yeah.
With the recent events in Europe, what are the consequences for the energy sector? I mean, price shortage. Is it for long term, for short term? Please, David.
Well, hopefully it's for a short term. We can't be sure of that. Hopefully this conflict will not expand beyond Ukraine's borders. It doesn't appear that that is Vladimir Putin's plan. And of course, as we talked this morning, Vladimir Putin's plans are apparently not going as he had hoped. The Ukraine has, the people there have certainly put up a stronger resistance to this invasion than I think the Russian government believed they would. And yes, the energy consequences of this are going to be very impactful, not just to Europe, but across the globe, as we've seen with higher volatility in oil prices. And, you know, they're up again this morning by several dollars a barrel after over the weekend, the US and Europe imposed some further sanctions on the Russian government, cutting many of Russia's banks off from the SWIFT system, which governs financial transactions, international financial transactions between banks. And then this morning, we had the announcement from the US Treasury Department that they are imposing even more sanctions, this time on the Russian Central Bank and its assets that are held in the United States, as well as, and I think this may be the most important sanction of all, sanctions on the Russian Direct Investment Fund, which apparently is made up of $630 billion, a sovereign wealth fund that President Putin had been hoping to be able to use to continue funding this invasion that's costing him $20 billion a day. So, you know, the impacts of this are going to be very substantial on everyone in terms of higher energy costs and even tighter oil markets. And you know, hopefully these negotiations that also started up today, ceasefire negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, will be successful and bring this to a swift end.
And Irina, including revert coal and nuclear plants in Germany, probably.
Well, there's been some interesting news coming out from Germany today. I just saw this. They're making a U-turn. They're making a complete U-turn on their plans to become a fully renewable economy. And I think this speaks volumes about priorities. And what it says is that Germany and the European Union as a whole had their priorities a bit wrong. And security of energy supply has now come to the top of the list, which I believe it should have been from the very beginning of the whole energy transition discussion. And the fact that Germany was quite quick, if you think about it, it was quite quick to do this, to say that the coal and even nuclear are no longer taboo, with the Chancellor Scholz saying security is important. I see this as a sort of silver lining, if you want. What's happening in Ukraine is a tragedy, but it has been a wake-up call for Germany and hopefully for other European countries with ambitious energy transition agendas to consider the issue of energy supply security. So it's better to do your homework later than never.
Yeah. With the cancellation of Nord Stream 2, probably the companies like Shell, they will not lose the money that they invest. They invested a lot of money, $10 billion. I don't know. David, you mean that those people could lose this money? How they will deal with the Nord Stream 2?
Well, I don't believe that cancellation is going to be permanent. But I do, first of all, I want to echo what Irina said. I do believe this whole invasion and this terrible thing that we're seeing right now in Europe is going to cause a rethinking of these premature transition policies in Germany and other countries. And but I believe the holdup in Nord Stream 2 is temporary. And once these hostilities have calmed down, I think you'll probably see Germany go back to finish up its process of approving that pipeline. Because what's going to happen out of all of this is, I believe, Germany and the rest of Europe are going to come to the realization that they're going to need substantial supplies of natural gas for a longer period of time than they had previously thought. Because wind power is still not performing at all in Europe. In Germany this past week, wind was providing less than 2% of Germany's energy mix several days. That is not sustainable. They invested billions upon billions of dollars in this wind industry, and thought they would be able to rely on it by now to provide, upwards of 30% of their energy mix, and it is just completely failing. And so I think you will see Germany ultimately approve Nord Stream 2, and these investments won't be lost.
Yeah, Irina, some companies from the United States start exporting LNG in high volumes to Europe nowadays. So probably they will keep doing this for a long time till we have Nord Stream 2 back to the operation. I mean, start operation again. What do you see with this equation of exporting a so complex gas from the United States to Europe and the recovery of Europe?
They've been exporting at record rates because they have the gas, and prices for pipeline gas in Europe have been high enough to make US gas competitive, because it's costlier purely because it comes from much further away and it's liquefied, which increases the cost. But I think if Europe comes to its senses with regard to energy security, they would commit to some long-term arrangements. The European Union, as demonstrated, has been against long-term contracts for gas supplies. Perhaps it's because of Gazprom. Perhaps it's a general aversion to long-term commitments because of the energy transition plans. But now that these plans are effectively falling apart, they might reconsider their stance on long-term commitments, because long-term contracts are one of the main reasons why Qatar, the US, and Australia can't step in and replace Russian gas. They have other clients who are paying for long-term supply. So I think Europe will try to diversify. Judging from what the German government said yesterday, they will be building now not one but 2 LNG import terminals. Again, better late than never. So they will seek energy supply diversification, which they were trying to do 10 years ago, before the energy transition came top of the agenda. So I see a diversification, and probably, as David said, because pipeline gas is still cheap, hoping the crisis is resolved reasonably within reasonable timeframes, probably the certification of Nord Stream 2 will continue.
So they want diversification.
I think
Yeah,
so. It's the only thing that makes sense. You secure your energy supplies by ensuring that you have a variety of suppliers. So if you are at odds with one of them, the others can step in.
Okay.
yeah, and this has been one of Vladimir Putin's big fears. It's why he spent so much time and money and energy opposing the development of U.S. shale gas resources in the first decade of this century and really up through the current day. Russia has funded a lot of the anti-oil and gas environmentalist movement in the United States, the anti-shale protesters, not just in the US, but also in England and other parts of Europe that have their own shale resources. Germany has very high potential shale resources under its own land that it's refused to develop, and Russian propaganda has played a big role in that. The fact of the matter is that the United States, LNG, does have capacity to continue to supply its current volumes to Europe and more for many decades to come. People are really not fully aware, I think, of the full extent of natural gas shale resources in the United States. They are just enormous, hundreds of years of potential supply at current usage levels. And right now we're exporting just a little over 10% of our daily production from the United States, and that could double in the next 2 to 3 years, and it wouldn't really present any sort of supply issues here in the U.S. So the potential for LNG supply to Europe is huge. But as Irina pointed out, it is more expensive. And, it'll be interesting to see over the next few years as Germany and these other countries look at ways to diversify their gas supply, if they will rethink those decisions not to develop their own resources, which of course would be ultimately the most cost-effective way to ensure their own energy security. This situation is very fluid and is really going to be fascinating to watch and write about in the coming years.
Yeah, that's right. Irina, please, the White House press secretary pushed renewable energy to stop dependence on foreign oil instead of increasing U.S. production. How do you see this statement from US?
Well, it's consistent with previous statements, is what I can say. But it doesn't really make economic sense, which I think we're all aware of. But this is the political line of the Biden administration. They don't just want to win the United States of foreign oil, they want to win it of any oil. And even in the face of evidence that demand for oil is on the rise, and that the fact that the United States is the largest consumer of crude oil, they are still sticking to their energy transition program that sees the US reduce its reliance on oil. I have no idea how this will happen. How do you discourage people to consume so much oil and oil products? But at least they are being consistent. I'll give them that. Credit where credit due. I mean, consistency deserves appreciation.
Yeah, that's great. David, United States consumes 20 million barrels a day of oil. And is there enough renewables to replace these volumes? And
No, No, of course not. And to follow on Arena's comment, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of a limited mind. And that's, I think, what we see coming from the Biden administration. Jim Psaki's comments Sunday were not at all surprising, as Arena pointed out, to those of us who have been observing what's happening here. But look, we've put hundreds of billions of dollars into the renewables industry and the electric vehicles industry in the United States over the past decade. And they have not displaced, this is the truth, those industries have yet to displace a single barrel of oil or MCF of natural gas. Their growth rate has been, pretty significant, but they don't even keep up with the rate of growth in demand for oil and gas. So they haven't displaced any fossil fuels at all in the United States. Natural gas has displaced a lot of coal here. So coal usage has gone down, but really renewables haven't been at that. And the Biden administration, the thing to understand about this administration is President Biden has surrounded himself with people who view climate change with a religious fervor, a true religious fervor. And they will never voluntarily back away from these policies. It will have to be forced upon them by the voters. I think we'll see that begin to happen this November, and probably this whole bunch will be thrown out of office in November 2024. But it's a long time until then, and they can do a lot more harm. And of course, the immediate thing that Psaki and the president are trying to protect is they're still hoping to get this $600 billion of new subsidies for these renewable and electric vehicles industries that was contained in the Build Back Better bill. They're hoping to get that done this year as a standalone piece of legislation. And so they have to continue with these, silly talking points at this point. I think you have to say they're really kind of silly.
They are, yeah.
Irina, is it the time for nationalism again? I mean, the reshoring for every country. So countries fear with the interference and risk of wars. You see that the time is for the nationalism?
Yeah, but nationalism has been on the rise for years now in response to increasingly radicalized liberalism. So what I'm seeing in the world during these pandemic years is people getting increasingly radical in their beliefs, in their opinions, sort of starting to look for a fight on social media mostly, thankfully. But yeah, I think this global online community that we have, that we're all part of, has been as much of a good thing as of a bad thing, because we tend to surround ourselves with people who share our opinions, and it leads to reinforcement and radicalization of these opinions. Speaking of renewables, this just in from Europe again. Last year, Europe saw a record amount of additions in wind power capacity. And yet they had an energy shortage. And now the wind power industry in Europe is saying, yes, we hit a record, but this is not enough. So this is another case of, if it doesn't work, do more of it. It makes zero sense from any rational perspective. And yet they are calling for more wind, even if wind has proven to not be enough. But their argument, as David said accurately, I think, it's a religious fervor that the supporters of this energy transition are displaying. So we need more wind to solve the problem with not enough wind. Basically, that's the message. And now the UN has issued another report that climate change is moving more quickly than we can cope with. Really, if we can't do anything, we can't do anything. Just stop spreading panic. I think this panic mongering is our biggest problem, not just in energy, in everything, really.
Yeah, and if you approach this problem from a standpoint of common sense, our trillions of dollars would be much better and more sensibly focused on finding ways to mitigate the problem in forms of equipping populations to actually adapt to it, than it is to continue to pour into these rent-seeking industries that can't solve the problem. I mean, it just from purely the laws of physics and thermodynamics, anyone who understands energy knows that this transition is simply not scientifically possible to move from these high energy dense sources of energy to wind and solar, which are incredibly lacking in energy density. Even in Texas, we see this happening during this last cold snap that we had. 2 days in a row, wind now occupies more than 30% of the capacity on the Texas power grid, but was generating less than 1% of the total energy being generated. Because in weather emergencies, wind turbines are going to fail, and so are solar panels. And it's just not a sustainable, viable solution to this issue. And what I'm very hopeful, and I think I hear Irina saying a similar thing, is I'm very hopeful that this crisis, which is a terrible tragedy happening in Ukraine, might wake people up, these global elites who make all these decisions on our behalf at COP26 and the Paris Climate Summits, will wake up and take a step back and finally realize that the direction they're heading simply can't work. And, I can hope anyway.
Yeah, I hope so too.
And David, is it a good opportunity not only for energy, but the goods and services and technologies and everything related to equipment in the upstream process of energy, maybe to reshore, to make a near-shoring? What is in the mind map of people in the United States at that time?
Well, of course, Americans, the general population is very frustrated. As I pointed out in a column I wrote last week, gasoline prices, it's the only form of energy where the price for the product is put on a giant lighted sign right next to the street you drive on, right? And so everybody in America sees that price going up every day, and they understand how that's costing them in their pocketbook. So Americans are becoming incredibly frustrated with this situation. They see that, we remember, it's not that long ago when the Trump administration was in office and we were paying about 40% less than we're paying today for gasoline. And gasoline hits the poorest people in your population the hardest because it's essentially a regressive tax. Everybody pays the same price. So it's a very frustrating situation. I think you're going to see it result in a very big turnover in Congress and in state legislatures in this coming election this year. And it's going to really put a lot of pressure on the Biden administration to step back from this money printing policy initiative that they're trying to go down. And I think it will, the blessing about it all is that it will be the demise of the Green New Deal. And any thoughts about funding that?
Irina, in the case of Europe is less in gasoline the problem, but is much more in terms of electricity. And this source for electricity are coal and gas. So is a little bit different, no?
Well, we also drive a lot of cars, so we're sensitive about petrol prices in Europe too. So I'd say, well, I get frustrated when I see how prices at the pump are rising. So I doubt I'm the only one. But we're kind of used to it, at least in Bulgaria. I mean, we have a higher pain threshold when it comes to petrol prices than in America. So the problem is not so acute. I can't speak for the other European countries, but I'm sure they are feeling the pain too. So yeah, and when petrol prices and diesel prices are higher, we feel it across the products we use, because most of transport of goods takes place in internal combustion engine vehicles. So
Yeah, in Brazil,
yes, it's a
in
bigger
Brazil-
problem than just gas prices.
in Brazil today, the price for gasoline is around €1, 7 reais, means almost €1 for 1 liter.
Yeah.
So, in United States, David, which price do you have today? You know,
For regular, the average price as of this morning is $3.58 a gallon. What is a gallon? 2.2 liters, I think.
no, a little bit more, three something,
Three something.
Yeah.
Okay. So it probably roughly the same as in Brazil.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know in Europe the price of gasoline today. So you know it today?
Well, I know the Bulgarian price. The A95 I use is 2.60 lives. Last time I filled up, which was a few days ago. That's about a little more than €1, about €1.30 or something like this per liter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite high for our standards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Now, of
let's
course,
see.
in some European countries, it's much higher, right? I mean,
It's much higher,
like
yes,
France
because of
and
EV
Spain.
incentives,
Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
higher
So-
excise duties, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see the next negotiation. They starting negotiations today, and suppose we can stop.
Let's
this
hope they
confusion.
reach some sort of agreement, yeah.
Yeah.
But the effects won't go away for a while yet. Whatever
Right.
happens at these negotiations, yeah, there'll be pain in the future as well.
Good. Thank you so much for this nice conversation today, Irina, Slav, and David
Thank you.
Blackmon.
Thank you. It's always enjoyable.
Yeah,
Hope you
always a
both have a
pleasure.
great week.